My bed is wide enough for three. I can stand up tall and stretch my arms up high. I can step outside, wander through the trees. I have all the room I need. I have all the light I need. It's dark outside, but I can read. One small flame will let me gaze upon your face. That always was enough for this old human race. I have all the light I need. I have all the time I need. Life is long and rich and green. I'll walk slowly till I'm old and bent and gray. Then I'll smile a knowing smile that says it's all okay. I have all the time I need. I have everything I need.
And you just heard Esther Golton here live on Fiddles and Frets. Hey, welcome, Esther.
Thank you so much, Ray.
Nice to see you here all the way. We're in Norristown, Pennsylvania, and you're all the way from Alaska.
That's right, Talkeetna, Alaska.
Now, you grew up in the Philly area.
I did. I grew up in Springfield, Delaware County, and all the way till I left for college in 1984. Graduated from Springfield High School. So.
Now, your instrument is the Mountain Dulcimer.
That is correct. I am playing a Mountain Dulcimer, but not very traditionally.
I would guess that most people that are listening know what a Mountain Dulcimer is, but I was going to ask you, talk a little bit about the origin of it, where it came from.
The Appalachian Mountain Dulcimer, well, comes from the Appalachian Mountains. Related to some instruments from Europe, Norway, and Sweden, and Germany. People brought them with them and settled in the Appalachians, and they were pretty isolated in the mountains. And I guess that the instrument evolved, you know, and no one really heard much about it except the people living there. They would do old folk songs, I think, from Europe. And it still is kind of a folk instrument and has a lot of different variation because there was never like a standardized way of building one or playing one. And so I think it was in the 60s that Gene Ritchie and a few other people started exposing the dulcimer more to the world.
And you were mentioning earlier in terms of how you play it. I know I had a dulcimer one time, and I just sort of played it like a open string guitar with one finger.
Exactly.
And you play the chords, and maybe you could explain a little bit about your technique.
Traditionally, right. Someone would be, I'm standing up right now. You can't see that when you're listening to this audio track, but I'm standing up. I actually now use, because I'm traveling so much, I'm using a collapsible walker as my dulcimer stand. I figure it'll double for a walker when I really need one years from now. So it's a good investment. But anyway, so I'm standing up playing, but traditionally a person would sit down and the dulcimer would be on their lap, and they would have a feather for a pick in their right hand in real traditional music and a stick called a noter in their left. And it might sound something like this, like it's a melody with a drone. So it would be, let me take this thing off.
Yeah, that's how I used to play it.
Exactly. And it's, it's a cool sound. And it's very dulcimer. And I like it. Personally, I only like it for about 3 songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm ready to hear something different. And that kind of has shaped the kind of things that I do. Yeah, I do a lot of different chords. I think I use it more like an acoustic guitar, and it doesn't have a full chromatic scale. It's missing a lot of notes. So I will tune different ways or bend strings, or, really try to find studied ways to extend the sound of the instrument a little bit more.
Would it be fair to say that you play it more like David Massengale?
I have not heard much David Massengale.
But
I've heard great things about him, though.
But he plays, with the chords like you
He
do.
does. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to hear him. Is he in this area? Where does he live?
He on the East Coast.
Okay. Yeah, I want to.
But he's got a bunch of recordings out.
Okay.
I wanted to read a quote by Carrie Newcomer, who's a singer-songwriter, I think from the West.
Midwest, I think.
Remember?
Mm-hmm.
And she said of you, "It is an act of courage and bravery whenever we send our art out into the world. But the world so needs works of honesty and truth and worth like these." And as she was responding, or I think speaking about your CD, which we'll talk about a little bit, which is called Unfinished Houses. And we talked a little bit about this before we went on here about putting our art out. And how it can be scary at times. Definitely.
And sometimes in the weirdest subconscious ways too. I have had music in and out of my life a lot. I started piano at 6 years old, and then the flute in 4th grade, like a lot of people do. And my family was really classical music oriented. And I thought I wasn't going to study music, even though I was talented at it. And then I ended up switching from agriculture into music at Penn State. Got a degree in music, and then realized that it made me like nervous and uptight to perform, and decided I would only play music if it was, I made sort of a vow to myself, if it was 90% expression and fun and only 10% ego. And it's a really, it was a really good thing to realize that early. And I stopped playing for a while. I was still writing songs, and then I would stop and I'd dabble in it a little. And every time I felt like there was too much ego in it, I'd back off. And then I got much more into living in the wilderness, and that we'll probably talk a little bit about that later. But it came back to me. I started really doing music more seriously when I moved to Alaska, and the local musical community in Talkeetna, which is kind of extraordinary, really welcomed me in. And I was in a couple rock bands and really, really enjoyed that. And I started playing solo around Alaska, and then I got so involved with a great internet radio project called Whole Wheat Radio that I stopped doing my own music. And although I felt very passionate about helping other independent musicians and hosting house concerts and webcasting them, I felt really passionate about what we were doing. I think I also used that a bit as an excuse to stop doing my own music because I was a little scared.
Yeah.
I had gotten to the point where I was traveling a little bit, and I opened for Iris DeMent, and I had a live concert CD at that point and had really been struggling to do a studio level CD, but wasn't seeming to be able to finish it. And so it was a really huge getting unstuck in the last year to say, you know what? I love Whole Wheat Radio. I love supporting other musicians, but I need to do a little bit for myself and face this, whatever this hidden fear is of actually doing it.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit later about Alaska and a little bit about Whole Wheat Radio, but let's hear another song here.
Okay. What was I thinking? I was thinking of doing a song called Going to Shadoo, and this is the second song on my CD, and one I finished while I was actually in the studio. And since you mentioned Carrie Newcomer, she was an influence on this song, a big one. In fact, I promised her that I would finish this song. Now, so let me back up a little bit. In Alaska, there is a 4-day annual songwriting camp called the Alaska Midnight Sun Song Camp. And I've been attending that with a bunch of friends for 4 or 5 years, most years. One summer, I think 2 or 3 summers ago, Carrie Newcomer was one of 3 instructors. It's really cool because it's very small, and we're all kind of working together, as opposed to having this student and instructor relationship. Anyway, she had us doing a free writing exercise about where do we come from. And at the same time, she had mentioned something earlier that day that really struck me. She said, don't be afraid when you're writing to use a phrase that no one else might quite understand, a phrase from your childhood or from your culture or from somebody else's neighborhood that just struck you as having this cool quality to it. So I was writing Where Do I Come From? And I started writing this story about my childhood with this horse named Shadoo. And I realized that my friend Celia and I would always say, we're going to Shadoo. He was this horse, but he was also a place. There's kind of an oddness to that. And I was like, oh, this is what she's talking about. I'm going to have the courage to write this little slice of life that other people might not get. And I was very scared because I thought, no one's going to relate to this song. It has no import. And I started to write it and I bounced the first 2 verses off Carrie, and she said, you need to finish this. There's such power in a story itself. And I promised her I would, but it took me 2 years to finally get back to it. And this is what I came up with. So this is Going to Shadoo, about a palomino and my best friend Celia. We kept a rope hidden under the brush on the hillside, sneaking in at dusk. We were going for a wild ride, hitchhiker, tangled tail, swatting at the deer flies. Give me a leg of Celia, I'm sitting so high. Honeysuckle, summer air, wrap your hands in golden hair, arms along his sleek neck. Nothing like a back so bare. Click your tongue, squeeze the legs, heels digging, nostrils flare, galloping up that hill, rope for reins, we don't care. See you later, Mom, I'm going to Shadoo. See you later, Mom, I'm going to Shadoo. Find a perch on that worn-out wooden post and rail, sitting there for hours watching daisies. Well, Celia says, let's jump this fence. I smile at one time. What the hell? It's dark enough, we won't get caught. Don't tell. See you later, Mom, I'm going to do. Shadoo. Before the stunt, we agree. If someone comes, we'll hit the trees. I'm on the ground, pull off a rail. Crickets chirp, no hint of breeze. Celia's up, her hoof stomps loud, announcing this bold decree. Suddenly, bright headlights glare. The moment's free. We're hiding in the bushes, not breathing, but we're very much alive. Shadoo's gone back to grazing as the car pulls out the drive. We're giggling at the sky. See you later, Mom, I'm going to Shadoo. See you later, Mom, I'm going to Shadoo. See you later, Mom, I'm going to Shadoo. See you later, Mom, I'm going to Shadoo.
And again, that's Esther Golton singing another song from your CD, which, why don't we just mention that? It's called Unfinished Houses. How long have you had this out?
I released it in the middle of September. So I went up to Fairbanks, Alaska to record it late spring and into early summer. It took about 2.5 months, a little less, about 7 weeks if I compress it all together.
I was looking at your playing there, and I see, boy, she's using suspended chords to come back to the tonic, as they say.
Very good, Ray.
That's about all I know about music theory. I wanted to ask about Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
You lived there, since 97?
Yeah, I moved there in 1997. The reason was, let's see, I'm going to back up a little to explain why. I hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine in 1991, or I attempted to. Got a little bit hurt from wear and tear, so I wasn't able to completely finish. And I loved it. I just loved being outside with so little bit on my back and so happy. It was a huge realization of how little stuff most of us probably need to be. In fact, probably a lot happier with less stuff, and really, really grew to love being more connected to nature. But I was hurt, so I couldn't actually hike for a while, and went to Japan for a couple of years, taught English, and I came back, and I wanted to study with a guy named Tom Brown Jr., who teaches wilderness survival classes, like learning to totally live in the wilderness with nothing store-bought whatsoever. I was fascinated with what is like essentially human, God, all this skill that we all had like so little time ago in the scheme of things. And we're all losing that skill. Like we're pretty helpless. So dependent on like a fragile infrastructure. And so I took a class with him, and then I went to visit an Appalachian Trail friend in the backwoods of Maine. He had bought a cabin on this beautiful little river in Maine, and that was Jim Kloss. And we ended up getting together romantically up there. And I didn't practice my wilderness survival skills very much. Instead, I got more involved in what he was doing, which was a more homesteading lifestyle, cooking on a wood cook stove and grinding our own grains into flour, and just definitely living a much simpler life than either of us had grown up with. And definitely felt connected to nature. But they were cutting all the trees down around there. I mean, Maine is notorious for its logging, and it's very common when you live in remote parts of Maine that you're actually on leased timberland. And you can own a cabin, but you lease it from a paper company. And that's exactly the situation we were in. And these huge machines were going, they were driving Jim just nuts. And I said, Jim, you always wanted to go to Alaska. So let's go to Alaska. It might really be wilder there. And we got rid of almost everything we had, packed up a pickup truck, and drove up to Alaska in May of 1997. And didn't know where we were going to end up. And it truly was a wilder place. We ended up our first year in Alaska living in a quintessential Alaskan dream, old log cabin on an unnamed lake, using the Alaska Railroad to get to the cabin. So you would, it's the last flag stop train in the United States, and you actually wave the train down when you want to catch it. Yeah, and it drops you off kind of in the middle of nowhere where there's no roads, and you hike to your cabin, and it's pretty amazing. Definitely a wilder place.
How has that affected your music?
How has it? I've definitely written songs in those settings, and I don't tend to. There's a whole sort of little genre of music they call Alaskana, and a lot of people write songs that tourists just love to buy that are very like blatantly about Alaska. Alaska this and Aurora Borealis, and mine tend to be more mood oriented stories that sort of take place in the city. I can do one for you if you want.
Sure.
So this song is called Echo Point, and it takes place on the Susitna River, up the tracks, as we say, from Talkeetna. If you hike around in that area, you'll find these old falling down log cabins, and often there's just a little corner of them still standing, and there might be a tree growing out of the side roof, and you'll still be able to kind of look inside that little piece of cabin that's left. It's a really harsh climate, for real. I mean, the heavy snow in the winter does not let these cabins last very long. But you'll look inside and you'll still see the remnants of somebody having lived there. In fact, it looks like a couple might have had this dream of living in the woods together, going back to the land. And they went and they build their cabin and they're living there. And then it's like they one day have some reason they need to go to town thinking they're coming back, and town is so much easier, and they don't make it. But you look inside the cabin, and there's still the kettle on a wood stove, or still a few dishes out on a table, and it's amazing. There was one cabin that had even like the photo albums, and they were all water damaged from a hole in the roof, and you could really see these people had a life there. So this song takes place in that setting. It's called Echo Point. Joe Sutherland lived north from here, log cabin on a lake. Homesteaded there after the war with his love he lay. When work was done, the wood was cut, the baking set to cool. They'd go on down to Echo Point to see the river's view. They'd call hello, hello, hello. Bent and twisted there, ran so cold and deep. A quarter mile from shore to shore, the current tossed and leaped. Dark water rushed between steep hills, the west side Curry Ridge. Elaine would dream of crossing it, she wished there was a bridge. One day Elaine, she told her love she couldn't stay no more. The hills and lake were tooped out in the moor. Before she flagged a freight to town, she stopped on her way down, looked at her cross and called that lonesome sound. Hello, sleeping when she left the house. He woke up with a sigh. Elaine, he said, she wasn't there. He thought that he would die. This land had never felt so big, the river never so wide. He stood alone at Echo Point, and all alone he cried. Hello, hello, hello. It's 30 years now since Joe died, and no one lives there still. The path is overgrown and hidden on their hill. I've heard from several local guides who've rafted there downstream. They've heard a sound come from that hill and echo like a dream. Hello,
And what was the name of that, Esther?
It's called Echo Point.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really love your songs, and your melodies are very much are great, and also very much in what do they call it, prosody in songwriting. Very much.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Words the words, and you got a really excellent voice, and it
Thanks.
goes with your music. Great.
I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I love compliments.
We don't have a lot of time, and I want to get 2 more songs out of you. But briefly, I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about Whole Wheat Radio, what it is, and how people can check it out.
Yes. Whole Wheat Radio is a webcast out of Talkeetna, Alaska. It started in 2002, right out of a tiny little cabin that I built in town after I left the cabin in the wilderness and said I was lonely and I wanted to play music. So I came into the town of Talkeetna and I built a little 12-foot by 12-foot cabin. And the first song I sang, All the Room I Need, was actually inspired out of cramming a lot into a tiny cabin. One of those things that got crammed in there was Jim's brainchild. Very spontaneous and brilliant brainchild called Whole Wheat Radio. He was the first person to sign up for DSL when it showed up in our little town of Talkeetna. And he went, oh my God, Esther. He had been a computer programmer in the past and left it all behind to live closer to nature. And in fact, he told me, he said, Esther, if you ever even get a phone, I'm leaving you. I want computers completely out of my life. But when I moved to town, he missed me. He didn't want to live in the woods himself. And he came out and joined me. I hooked an extension cord to the neighbor's cabin to get a little bit of electricity. And I got a phone because I needed to be able to call to make, be booking gigs and stuff. Before we knew it, there was a computer in the house with a phone and electricity. How could we not have a computer? And Jim got back into it, got DSL, and he's like, oh, I just started a webcast. Like, he immediately saw what he could do. And he got on the microphone and he started talking on the mic, and he made a little chat, and somebody started interacting with him, while he was on the mic via the chat. And he's like, wow, this is amazing. And it happened so fast. And he's quite a brilliant programmer and a very creative person. And it just, one thing led to another. It became a very, very interactive website with a lot of creativity and kookiness. And he's also, Jim has a lot of personality on a microphone. And I guess he and I together kind of did. So we had a daily show called the Ranting and Raving Whole Wheat Radio News Muffin. And I would join Jim some of the time, not all the time. And he can do a monologue for an hour, and just, it's amazing. Kind of hard when you're living in the woods with him because you got to, listen to him. So it was great. I was so happy for Whole Wheat Radio because he was getting it all out to a loving audience. And then what happened that's really interesting with Whole Wheat Radio is we started out playing our own record collection. And the record industry didn't like that people were playing their record collections on the internet. And they were suing people, and they were charging huge fees. The Recording Industry of America, the RIAA, was very aggressive about it. And Jim started reading about it and said, you know what? We could really get in trouble for this. And got a little scared. And we took a huge step. We had already started to build a listening audience with playing, major label music.
Right.
And some small people's music, mostly Talkeetna musicians. And Jim said, I think we should switch. We both said, let's switch to independent music. And we immediately lost half our listening audience. And then it was just this amazing, magical thing where we discovered independent music and realized what an unbelievable, rich amount of music is out there. So many people writing and performing and recording, and you can get some weak music submitted for sure.
Sure.
We allowed our listeners in a democratic way to choose what music would be played. So we weren't the ones deciding. Everything that people sent us got put into the library. Mm-hmm. The listeners then would rank the music and tag it and request it. And we broke all the rules that the RIAA was setting because we were playing music by people who actually had control of their own music. It was really, really exciting. And we discovered gems like Paul Cam and Eleanor McDonald out on the West Coast. And, I discovered Antje because of Whole Wheat Radio, Antje Duvakat, Danny Schmidt, Who else are some of the amazing discoveries? Michael McNevin is a smaller time musician that is an unbelievably wonderful writer. There's so many people out there, and instead of thinking, oh, they're not important because there's so many, you just go, wow, look at all these gems, all this music we can discover and see what resonates with us. It's a different world.
Well, that's pretty much what I play. I mean, every once in a while I'll get the Pete Seeger, and of course the Live 365 has all that worked out in terms of paying people.
Yeah.
But what I play is those kind of people for the most part.
Exactly, you do too, and it's so neat. And our listening audience also got educated with us, and they got into the enthusiasm for discovering new music. And then we started. We couldn't. A lot of musicians wanted to travel to Alaska and perform. Obviously, we couldn't have concerts in my 12 by 12 cabin, so we built a larger cabin that we could have house concerts in, and started webcasting house concerts live.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that, but the whole thing is very cool. I mean, when you go there, you can chat with people that are there. Like you said, you can you go into the library and pick songs, and that's how the playlist is developed.
Exactly.
I suppose there are times when there aren't that many people and the computer kicks in.
Yes, exactly. If no one's request favor music that hasn't been played a lot, or artists that generally have been ranked higher, but these particular songs haven't played, or sometimes it'll just say, we're going to play stuff that's never, ever come out of the library before.
And you have house concerts, which you then broadcast live. And I listened. It was so cool. I listened to Antje Duvakat because I've known her for a long time, since she was about 18. And it was just so cool hearing her live on the internet from Alaska.
Yeah.
And at your time, it was like 7 or whatever, and I was listening at 11 o'clock at night. And you took photographs, and the photographs came up on the site. It's just so much stuff on that site. It's just very cool. In fact, I requested, I wanted you to play one of Antje's songs. You do a couple of hers.
Yes.
So why don't you do that now?
That'd be so fun. I would love to. Yeah, and it's neat because the Alaskan audience is can be very interactive with their performers. So there's actually a house concert coming up very shortly. There's going to be like one every 2 weeks for the next few weeks. In fact, Tim Mason, who books Club Passim, performance poet, he's going to do a concert in the middle of February, and we're in 2008 if you're all listening to a recording of this later. So wholewheatradio.org, by the way.
I was going to ask you what the website was.
Yeah. So Antje Duvakat is one of the independent artists that I kind of went crazy for when I first heard her music. I really, really love her sense of melody and her lyric writing and the raw quality with which she sings, performs, and writes. Just, everything resonates differently with everybody. But for me, like, it really, she was quite a discovery. Her music was quite a discovery. So I recorded one of her songs called Reasonland, and that's not the one I'm going to do for you now. I'm going to do my dulcimer version of her, probably one of her more popular.
It's a great song. It's a great song.
Yeah, of Dandelion. I really love this song. So here we go. Let's see how it goes. When Harry met Sally, it was settled. Mary Jane would fall for Spider-Man. The story was set in stone like Tarzan and Jane, Yoko and John. You were like my Hollywood movie, butterflies in Central Park kiss. Of course you would pursue me, I was Julia Roberts. I mean, how could you resist? But I am the 4th of July, throwing you a fire in the sky. You could go blind in my light, but you were looking for an orchid. I put on the best of my war horse. I could have been your Marilyn Monroe. You had only eyes for the Mona Lisa. You shared my cab ride all the way home. But I am the 4th of July, throwing you fire in the sky. You could go blind in my light. You were looking for a tea light. Hey, oops. You were looking for an orchid, and I will always be a dandelion. I am a middle class home. I am a worn out banjo. I'll never dance in Swan Lake. I'll never play the cello. I am the Northern Lights. I am invisible. I am a dandelion. I am forever wild. I am the 4th of July, throwing you fire all the way across the sky. You could go blind in my light. You were looking for an orchid, and I will always be. You were looking for a tea light, and I will always be a forest fire, a dandelion, a dandelion, a dandelion.
You do that song great.
Thank you. It's so funny, you know, like, oh my God, I made a mistake on the radio. Now everybody's going to hear it forever.
Playing live, that's part of it.
Exactly.
And well,
Thank you so much. All you have to do is laugh.
I love the way you play the dulcimer. It's
Thanks.
great. Yeah.
Thanks. I just did a demonstration for 6th graders in a Waldorf school today who all built cardboard dulcimers.
Oh, wow.
And they're learning to play them. Their teacher is into dulcimers. And I was just amazed. But I went and I demonstrated all these different sounds I'm getting out of the dulcimer. And they were so excited. And at the end of the thing, they all asked me to sign their dulcimers. And I felt bad, you know. Like, like they had these beautiful... They painted them all these different colors.
Oh, cool.
And they wanted to sign, you know, the front of them. And I thought, well, they can always repaint them if they get tired of seeing the signature. So.
I wanted to ask you, before we have you go out on a song, the name of your CD again is Unfinished Houses. And you're going to be playing in the East Coast for into March, is that correct? Or how far are we going?
That's correct. I'm in the middle of a 2-month tour. January 12th was when it started at the Tin Angel in Philly, which was really exciting.
Yeah.
To get in. Liz Ann Knott
Right.
is a local artist who's taken a liking to me, and I'm really grateful. And so I was able to open for her and a couple other wonderful local artists. And that's when it started, and I'm going all the way to March 12th. So it's a full 2-month.
And you were in Florida,
tour.
and you're going to go to what, Massachusetts?
Yes, sometime in Boston, sometime in Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm also now very shortly going to embark on a tour southwards. So Washington, D.C., I have a few gigs, and then North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee.
So if you're listening from any of those areas, check
Birmingham, Alabama, too.
Check Esther's website out, and she has her schedule.
Yep.
And your website is?
Eston.com, and that's Esther with an H in it. ESTHERGOLTON, as in Nancy. EstherGolton.com.
Hey, Esther, thanks a lot for coming in. It was great.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
This is wonderful.
And what are you going to end up with?
That is a great question, Ray. What am I going to end up with? Let me think here. If you had a choice between the Hoedown Philosopher or Unfinished Houses, what would be your choice?
Unfinished Houses.
Okay. I'm going to tune again for this. This is one of the few songs that I have tuned to a traditional modal tuning for the dulcimer. In fact, when I wrote it, I wanted to call the album Unfinished Houses. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to write a song called Unfinished Houses. And then I said, I want this to be modal. And I just opened up a book and I said, okay, Dorian mode, that's what it's going to be. The neat thing about modes is they almost write their own melodies. So in Alaska, it's the exception for somebody to actually, at least in rural Alaska, it's the exception for people to live in houses that are finished, that would actually have trim on the windows, or finished outdoors. People, it's really expensive to build there, I think. And so people are really excited about building a place, and then they're really excited about getting in there and out of the cold or into a little slightly larger space than they're used to. And I have lived in now 3 or 4 or 5 different places that every time I'm so ambitious to, we're going to finish this before we move in. Then you don't, and you move in, you say, well, we'll finish it while we're living in it. And it's really hard to do that, harder than you would think. And my partner, Jim, has said the most wonderful thing many times. He's like, it's not what your house looks like or whether the windows are trimmed or how nice your furniture is. It's what happens inside it. And I just love that concept so much. So that's what I wanted to name my album, Unfinished Houses. And I wrote this little poem. It's called, what would you think it would be called? Unfinished Houses. In the city of unfinished houses, candles are chasing their flames. The windows are dusty and frameless, and plywood holds on to its stains. In the city of unfinished houses, we residents flicker and flare. Our eyes become blind to the careless, untended mistakes everywhere. We live in unfinished houses, shelfless, trimless, and bare. Emptiness echoes around us. You see, fire cannot